The ocean is vast, eternal, and unforgiving. For centuries it has swallowed fleets, devoured explorers, and concealed secrets that humanity has no business uncovering. Yet people return to it time and time again, drawn by its glittering promise of beauty and escape. Cruises in particular are sold as floating paradises. Endless buffets, champagne pools, smiling crew members trained to soothe every worry. Families board these giant vessels believing they are stepping into safety, a sanctuary at sea. But for some unlucky souls, their voyage becomes a descent into something far more sinister. This story begins like many others, with laughter, photographs, and careless excitement. The ship in question was known as the Selene Voyager, a massive cruise liner that gleamed white under the port's floodlights. It promised luxury, entertainment, and nights filled with music. The brochures showed couples dancing under chandeliers, children racing across polished decks, and smiling captains assuring guests that their safety was guaranteed. On the evening of departure, thousands gathered at the harbor. Luggage rolled across concrete, champagne corks popped, and horns blasted in celebration. The ship towered above the crowd like a cathedral, its windows glittering with light. To outsiders, it looked alive, pulsing with excitement. But if you stood very still, if you listened closely, you could hear something beneath the cheer. The faintest groan, like a stomach unsettled or a whisper caught in steel. Most ignored it. Only a few paused, uneasy. Among them was Rachel, a travel blogger who had been invited for promotional coverage. She smiled for her live stream, waving at viewers, but deep inside her chest a weight pressed. She couldn't explain why, but the ship felt wrong. It wasn't the size, nor the smell of fuel, nor the chaotic noise of thousands boarding. It was the way the ship seemed to be watching her, its shadow stretched over her like a hand. First night on the Selene Voyager, she chirped into her phone. It's bigger than I imagined. You won't believe the stories I'll be sharing. Food, shows, cabins, everything. Stay tuned, the comments flooded in. So jealous, have fun. Take us with you. Rachel forced a laugh and shut the stream. For a second, she glanced at the water beside the ship. Black waves lapped gently, but they didn't shimmer with moonlight. They seemed too dark, almost oily, swallowing the reflection instead of casting it. She shook her head, telling herself it was nerves. Nearby, a family posed for pictures. Children squealed as they dragged their parents aboard. Newlyweds kissed passionately at the railing. Elderly couples clutched each other's hands, whispering about the adventure ahead. The boarding announcement echoed. Passengers, welcome aboard the Selene Voyager. Please proceed to your cabins. Tonight we set sail for a journey you'll never forget. The crowd cheered. Rachel wasn't the only one who hesitated. At the very edge of the pier stood an old fisherman, his face wrinkled like dried leather, eyes clouded but sharp. He muttered under his breath as the ship's engines roared to life. Not again, he whispered. God help them all. But his warning was drowned out by the blaring horn as the Selene Voyager began to move. The first hours on board were exactly as advertised. Glittering chandeliers illuminated the grand atrium where music spilled from a string quartet. Crew members in crisp uniforms handed out cocktails. Guests laughed, danced, and explored. Rachel walked the halls, filming details for her channel. The golden handrails, the infinity pool at the stern, the endless hallways of cabin doors. Everything was polished, pristine, almost too perfect. Yet the longer she walked, the more unsettled she felt. In one hallway, she noticed a painting that didn't match the ship's decor. It was a storm scene, dark waves crashing, lightning splitting the sky, and in the center, a ship nearly identical to the Selene Voyager, its decks full of shadowy figures screaming into the void. She froze, her phone camera lingering on it. Weird choice for a luxury liner, she whispered. A crew member appeared behind her, silent at first, then speaking in a tone too smooth. Beautiful, isn't it? Rachel startled. The crewman's smile was wide, but his eyes didn't match it. Yeah, she said slowly. Kind of unsettling, though. The man tilted his head. Every voyage must honor its history. What do you mean? But before he could answer, another guest called for help with luggage, and the crewman walked away. Rachel stared after him, unsettled. Dinner that night was extravagant. Lobster, filet mignon, endless champagne. The ballroom glittered with gold as dancers twirled under crystal chandeliers. Guests clapped, cheered, and toasted to the beginning of their journey, but beneath the joy something pulsed. The ship shuddered faintly like a beast stretching in its sleep. Plates rattled, glasses trembled, and several passengers glanced around nervously. "It's just the waves," a waiter reassured them. Yet outside, the sea was calm. Too calm. Rachel excused herself from dinner and wandered onto the outer deck. The night air was cold, the stars smothered by thick clouds. The sea below looked endless and black, like a void, and then she heard it, a whisper. It drifted up from the water, faint but clear. Her name. Rachel. Her blood froze. She spun around, but no one was there. Passengers laughed inside, music boomed, but out here she was alone. The whisper came again, longer this time, almost pleading. "Rachel, come closer." She stumbled back, heart pounding. "No," she hissed under her breath, and then just as suddenly as it came, it stopped. The ocean stilled. The deck lights flickered, buzzing faintly. Rachel ran back inside. That night, passengers settled into their cabins. Some fell asleep instantly, lulled by the faint rocking of the sea. Others stayed up late, drinking and gambling in the casino. The ship seemed alive with endless possibilities. But in the lower decks, where crew members worked unseen, things were different. Several reported hearing knocking in the storage rooms. Not random knocks, but a rhythm, as if someone inside the steel walls was begging to be let out. One worker, Mateo, followed the sound into a dark corridor. His flashlight flickered as he approached a locked freezer door. The knocking grew louder. "Who's in there?" he demanded. No answer. Only pounding, frantic, urgent. He radioed his supervisor, but the static screeched so loudly he dropped the device. When he bent to pick it up, the pounding stopped. Silence filled the hall. Mateo's breath fogged in the freezing air. Slowly, he turned to leave, and then the door behind him creaked open, though no one had touched it. Up above, Rachel tossed in her bed, unable to sleep. The whisper still rang in her ears. She tried to convince herself it was exhaustion, maybe the sea playing tricks. But when she glanced at her phone, she noticed something that made her stomach clench. Her live stream recording from earlier had captured faint audio she hadn't heard before. Behind her cheerful introduction, behind the crowd's chatter, another voice whispered. Not hers. Not the audience. Not the crowd. Just a single word, stretched like a sigh. Stay. The Selene Voyager sailed deeper into the night, carrying with it thousands of passengers who believed they were safe, entertained, and free. But the sea outside grew heavier, its black surface refusing to reflect even the faintest starlight. Clouds swallowed the sky, smothering the moon. The ocean seemed less like water and more like a living void. Rachel, unable to rest, found herself wandering again through the glowing hallways. The carpet muffled her footsteps, yet she felt as though every sound she made was amplified, echoing in ways it shouldn't. Portraits lined the walls, elegant frames containing painted faces of captains and crew from years long gone. Their eyes seemed to follow her, cold, unblinking, judging. She tried to laugh it off. Just tired, she whispered. Too much champagne. Yet the silence answered her, and in that silence she caught the faintest sound. A woman weeping. The sobs were muffled, echoing from somewhere ahead. Rachel froze. Guests were supposed to be asleep by now. Still, curiosity pushed her forward. She followed the sound down a corridor she hadn't seen before, one that seemed narrower, darker, as though it wasn't meant for passengers. The weeping grew louder. It came from behind a metal door with a small glass porthole. Rachel peered through the window. At first she saw nothing, then movement. A pale hand pressed against the glass, fingers splayed wide. Rachel staggered back, her breath catching. The hand slid down, leaving a streak as if the glass were fogged from the inside, and then it was gone. The weeping stopped. Silence. Rachel's pulse hammered. She wanted to scream, to call for help, but when she turned, the corridor behind her had changed. The walls were closer, the lights dimmer. She spun in panic. The door she had just looked through was gone, replaced with blank steel. She blinked hard. No, I didn't imagine that. The ship groaned around her, a low sound that rattled in her chest like a growl. Somewhere far below, something heavy shifted, like chains dragged across a floor. Rachel ran. Elsewhere, In the lavish casino where laughter still flowed, a dealer noticed something strange. A table of guests had been playing cards, drinks in hand, when suddenly one man slumped forward. At first they thought he was drunk. But when the dealer touched his shoulder, the man slid sideways, eyes wide open, mouth stretched in a silent scream. His skin was ice cold. Panic spread quickly. Staff rushed to cover the body, assuring guests that medical teams were handling it. But whispers spread. Heart attack, seizure, something worse. The body was carried away, but those who saw his face swore his expression wasn't of pain, it was of terror, as though he had seen something so awful it froze him where he sat. By morning, 3 more passengers were gone. No announcements were made. The crew moved with forced smiles, avoiding questions, but whispers rippled through the halls. Rachel, exhausted and pale, overheard fragments of conversations. He was just there, then gone. They said she jumped, but nobody saw her on the cameras. My cabin door opened by itself at 3 in the morning. Rachel tried to record her thoughts, to stream, but each time she went live, her connection failed. Footage corrupted, audio scrambled with whispers that weren't hers. One clip, when replayed, showed her face, gone but distorted. Her mouth moved out of sync, her eyes too wide, too dark. She deleted it in a panic. As the days bled together, the Selene Voyager began to change. Passengers noticed hallways that seemed longer than before, doors that led to rooms they hadn't seen, windows that looked out onto blackness even at noon. Some swore the ship was larger inside than it appeared from the outside, as if it were expanding. Crew members whispered among themselves. They had heard the legends: ships lost at sea, wrecks that were never recovered, vessels that returned empty. Crew vanished, and always stories of a ship that reappeared under different names, repainted and rebranded, luring new victims aboard. The Selene Voyager had once been another ship, and before that another, and before that. Rachel dug for information. She cornered a young bartender one night, slipping him cash to loosen his tongue. "You shouldn't ask," he whispered, glancing around nervously. "They don't like it when passengers know." "Who's they?" she pressed. He leaned closer. "This ship? It isn't new. It's been sailing for decades, maybe longer. Every few years it disappears. When it comes back, it's under a new name. Same hull, same steel, same curse. And every time, people vanish. Always covered up. Accidents, illness, nobody ever admits what really happens." Rachel's blood ran cold. "And the crew? Why do you stay?" He swallowed hard. "You don't leave. Not once you've signed on. You either serve, or you feed it." "Feed what?" Before he could answer, his face went pale. His eyes shifted over Rachel's shoulder. She turned, but no one was there. When she looked back, the bartender was gone. Only his half-polished glass remained on the counter, still wet, still warm, as though he had been erased from existence in the span of a heartbeat. That night, storms struck. Passengers huddled in their cabins as thunder shook the ship. But it wasn't just thunder. Beneath the booms came other sounds, screams carried on the wind, chains dragged across decks, and whispers in dozens of voices chanting in languages no one recognized. Rachel pressed her ear to her cabin wall and froze. On the other side, in the supposedly empty room, she heard someone breathing. Slow, ragged, inhuman. She backed away, heart pounding. Her lights flickered. The mirror above her desk rippled as though it were made of water. She stared into it, and for a moment, her reflection didn't move with her. It smiled when she didn't. Rachel stumbled back, whispering a prayer. The ship lurched violently, throwing her to the floor. Outside, alarms blared, but the crew's voices over the intercom were broken, distorted almost like laughter. She crawled to her door, pulled it open, and joined the chaos of screaming passengers flooding the halls. Children cried, parents clutched them tightly, couples argued about where to run. But where could they run? The ocean stretched in every direction. endless, black, waiting. And as Rachel fought her way through the crowd, she realized the ship was steering itself. No captain commanded it. No crew directed the chaos. The Selene Voyager moved with purpose, as though it were alive, and it was carrying them somewhere no map had ever marked. The storm lasted hours, but the strangest thing was that no rain touched the decks. Thunder cracked, lightning flashed across the horizon, yet the ship's surfaces remained dry, polished, untouched. The ocean itself heaved, black waves rising, like mountains and collapsing with roars that shook bone. But not a single droplet splashed against the passengers. It was as though the storm were only for them to see and hear, a theater of terror staged to keep them trembling. Rachel clung to a railing, her knuckles white, as others screamed and prayed around her. A man shouted for lifeboats, but when the crew hurried to the sides, they froze. The lifeboats, rows of them, were gone. Every harness hung empty, ropes dangling as if the boats had never existed. The storm lasted hours, but the strangest thing was that no rain touched the decks. Thunder cracked, lightning flashed across the horizon. Yet the ship's surfaces remained dry, polished, untouched. The ocean itself heaved, black waves rising like mountains and collapsing with roars that shook bone, but not a single droplet splashed against the passengers. It was as though the storm were only for them to see and hear, a theater of terror staged to keep them trembling. Rachel clung to a railing, her knuckles white as others screamed and prayed around her. A man shouted for lifeboats, but when the crew hurried to the sides, they froze. The lifeboats, rows of them, were gone. Every harness hung empty, ropes dangling, as if the boats had never existed. The storm lasted hours, but the strangest thing was that no rain touched the decks. Thunder cracked, lightning flashed across the horizon, yet the ship's surfaces remained dry, polished, untouched. The ocean itself heaved, black waves rising, like mountains and collapsing with roars that shook bone, but not a single droplet splashed against the passengers. It was as though the storm were only for them to see and hear, a theater of terror staged to keep them trembling. Rachel clung to a railing, her knuckles white, as others screamed and prayed around her. A man shouted for lifeboats, but when the crew hurried to the sides, they froze. The lifeboats, rows of them, were gone. Every harness hung empty, ropes dangling as if the boats had never existed.
No, no, no,
A woman cried, falling to her knees. I saw them earlier. They were here, they were. Rachel had filmed them during boarding. She had the proof. But when she pulled out her phone to show the footage, her gallery was blank. Every video, every picture she'd taken since stepping on the Selene Voyager was gone, replaced with black squares. The ship moaned, metal straining like bones popping in joints. Passengers stumbled as the vessel tilted, not from the storm but from something deeper, something shifting in the bowels of the ship. The lights flickered and then dimmed, leaving only the emergency glow strips that painted the halls blood red. From somewhere within that red haze came the sound of footsteps. Hundreds of them. Rachel turned, her breath seizing. Figures were moving through the crowd, but they weren't passengers. They weren't crew. They were pale, waterlogged, their eyes black hollows that reflected no light. The stench of brine and rot clung to them, leaving wet footprints on the carpet. The first scream tore through the air as one of the drowned things reached for a man. Its hand clamped onto his arm with inhuman strength, pulling him into an embrace that looked almost gentle, until the man's body convulsed. He writhed, mouth open in a silent scream as his skin drained of color, his veins blackening. In seconds he collapsed, a husk, his eyes glassy and void. Chaos erupted. Passengers scattered in all directions, slamming into walls, trampling one another. The drowned figures moved with eerie calm, each step deliberate, inevitable, like predators who knew their prey had nowhere to go. Rachel ran, heart hammering, lungs burning. She shoved past bodies, ignoring the screams behind her. Her instincts pulled her down a stairwell, away from the crowds, deeper into the ship. She didn't know why, only that the upper decks were death. The stairwell was narrow, dimly lit. Water dripped from the ceiling, though there were no pipes, no leaks. The further she descended, the colder the air became until her breath puffed white. At the bottom, she found herself in a long corridor lined with steel doors. Each bore a number but no signs. Some rattled as though fists pounded from within, Others leaked a dark liquid that pooled across the floor, staining the soles of her shoes. Rachel's mind screamed to turn back, but her legs carried her forward. Something compelled her, a pull she couldn't fight. One door in particular drew her. Number 13. Its porthole window was fogged and faint whispers seeped through the cracks. Not words, just tones. Mourning, begging. She wiped the glass with her sleeve. Inside, dozens of faces stared back. Pale, contorted, pressed against the window from the other side as if the tiny room contained a crowd far too large for its size. Their mouths moved in unison, yet no sound came through. Then suddenly, all at once, they stopped moving. They smiled. Rachel staggered back with a strangled gasp. The door handle rattled violently, the metal groaning as if the thing inside wanted out. She turned and sprinted, boots splashing through the black puddles, her breath tearing from her lungs. Behind her, steel banged and screeched, echoing through the corridor. When she burst back into the stairwell, she nearly collided with another passenger, a young man, blood splattered across his shirt. His eyes were wild. "You heard them too," he rasped. "They call to you. They won't stop until—" A wet hand shot from the shadows, clamping onto his face. His words cut off in a gargled cry. Rachel screamed as the drowned figure yanked him into the dark. Bones cracked, flesh tore. His body went limp. Rachel fled upward, 2 steps at a time, until her legs threatened to give. On the entertainment deck, chaos still raged. Dozens of passengers had already fallen, their bodies twisted unnaturally, eyes staring blankly into nothing. The drowned things glided among the survivors, patient, methodical. It wasn't a slaughter. It was a harvest. Rachel collapsed against a wall, chest heaving. Her mind screamed to hide, to vanish, but a different thought pierced through the panic. Someone had to know. If she could record, if she could send a signal, if even one clip survived, maybe the truth would escape this ship, even if she didn't. She pulled out her phone again. No signal, no Wi-Fi, but the camera still worked. She lifted it, framing the carnage before her, passengers shrieking, clawing at locked doors, figures dragging them into shadows, she whispered. Voice trembling, "This is Rachel Miles. If anyone sees this, the Selene Voyager is not—" Her words cut off. Because through her phone's screen, she saw something behind her. Slowly, she turned. A mirror hung on the wall, a decorative piece meant to make the hall look wider. In its reflection, she didn't see herself. She saw water rising, filling the corridor, drowning her in seconds. She saw her body floating, eyes black, mouth open in a silent scream. And then the water was gone. The mirror was just a mirror, but her reflection smiled again, independent of her. She dropped the phone, shattering the screen. Above deck, the storm cleared as quickly as it had come. The sea lay flat, calm, almost glassy. The stars returned. To anyone looking from a distance, the Selene Voyager appeared perfectly serene, gliding across peaceful waters. Inside, screams still echoed. Crew members moved mechanically, faces blank, eyes glazed. They no longer tried to help the passengers. They joined the drowned things, guiding survivors toward locked doors, whispering soothing lies. Rachel realized then, the crew hadn't been victims. They had always been part of it, bound to the ship, servants of whatever lived in its hull. The realization made her legs weak. "God," she whispered. "We were never supposed to leave." The hours blurred into one another. Rachel hid in a supply closet, clutching her knees to her chest, listening to the distant cries that dwindled one by one. She didn't know how much time passed, minutes, hours, maybe longer. The ship seemed to move differently now, halls shifting, doors relocating, as though it enjoyed confusing her. When silence finally fell, it was worse than the screams. She forced herself out, stumbling through a corridor she didn't recognize. Doors lined the walls, but none had handles. At the end, a single elevator waited, its doors open. Every instinct screamed at her not to step inside. But her legs moved anyway. The doors slid shut, sealing her in. The buttons were unmarked. She pressed one at random. The elevator shuddered and began to descend, far deeper than any ship should allow. The numbers on the panel didn't stop at 0. They kept going. -1. -2. -3. The air grew colder. The lights dimmed. Her breath came in clouds. At last the doors opened. Before her stretched a cavernous chamber, larger than the ship itself should contain. Rusted chains hung from the ceiling, swaying without wind. Pools of stagnant water rippled across the floor. And in the center, something moved. At first she thought it was machinery, a mass of steel and cables, gears grinding. But then it shifted and she realized it was flesh. Flesh fused with metal, a monstrous heart pulsing slowly, embedded in the ship itself. Veins of rust and rope stretched outward, connecting it to every wall, every beam. With each pulse the ship shuddered. It was alive and it was hungry. The whispers filled the chamber, no longer faint but deafening. A chorus of voices from every passenger that had ever sailed and died aboard this cursed vessel. They screamed for release, for mercy, for vengeance. Rachel stumbled forward, compelled, tears streaming down her face. The heart throbbed, wet and glistening. For a moment she thought she saw faces pressed against it, mouths opening and closing, trapped within. Her hands rose without her consent, reaching for the beating mass. The ship wanted her. Rachel's fingertips hovered inches from the grotesque heart of the ship. Heat radiated from it, thick and humid like breath from a beast's open mouth. The whispers surged, crashing through her mind, drowning her own thoughts. They weren't just begging anymore. They were commanding. Join us, feed it. You belong to the sea now. Her body trembled. She wanted to resist, to pull her hand away, but every fiber of muscle strained against her. It felt as though invisible threads wrapped around her limbs, tugging her closer. Her knees bent, her spine bowed, and still her hand reached. Then a sudden crash echoed across the chamber. Rachel jerked her head toward the noise. A figure stumbled from the shadows, bloodied but alive. A man in a torn tuxedo, his tie dangling loose. His face was pale with fear, but his eyes burned with determination. "Don't touch it," he shouted hoarsely. The sound snapped Rachel back. With a gasp, she tore her hand away, falling backward into stagnant water. The whispers shrieked in her skull, furious at being denied. The man rushed forward, grabbing her by the arm and hauling her to her feet. "If you touch it, you're gone. It takes you. You become part of it." Rachel's lips quivered. "What is it?" He swallowed hard, his jaw tight. "The ship's heart, its soul. Whatever it is, it's been feeding for decades, maybe centuries. Every passenger, every crewman, every lost body ends up here. It grows stronger with each one." Rachel's eyes widened. "How do you know?" His face twisted with grief. "Because I've seen it take someone before. My wife, she boarded with me. She's in there now." His voice cracked. I can hear her voice in the whispers. Rachel stared at him, horror flooding her chest. She wanted to deny it, to tell him he was wrong, but deep inside she knew he wasn't. Those faces she'd seen pressed against the throbbing mass. They were real, trapped forever. The chamber groaned. The chains rattled. The heart pulsed harder, as though angered by interruption. The man grabbed Rachel's hand. "We can't stay here, come on." They ran, splashing through water, the chamber trembling behind them. Rachel dared one glance over her shoulder and wished she hadn't. From the fleshy heart, shapes were forming. Pale bodies tore free from its surface, dripping with slime, their mouths opening in soundless wails. They stumbled forward, their eyes empty, their fingers reaching. Rachel screamed. The man yanked her through a doorway, slamming it shut just as the first hand clawed against the frame. They collapsed in a narrow maintenance tunnel, gasping for air. The dim light flickered above them, casting jerky shadows across their faces. Rachel's voice shook. What do we do? We can't fight that. We can't fight this." The man wiped blood from his forehead, his chest heaving. "We can't fight it." "But maybe we can starve it," Rachel frowned. "Starve it?" He nodded grimly. "It feeds on us, on fear, on souls. That heart, it's the center. If we can cut it off, maybe we can end it." Rachel's stomach twisted. "End it how? Burn it? Blow it up?" He shook his head. "I don't know. But I know one thing, staying alive isn't enough. This ship won't let us off. It doesn't want survivors. The only way out is to kill it." The thought lodged like a blade in Rachel's chest. Kill the ship. Could that even be possible? The tunnel groaned. Metal warped. Somewhere above, footsteps dragged. The drowned things were searching. Rachel forced herself to her feet, wiping grime from her arms. "Fine, then we find a way. But first I need to know your name." The man blinked, surprised by the question. For a moment the human exchange seemed foreign, forgotten amid horror. "Elliot," he said quietly. "Rachel?" she replied. And then, without another word, they started moving. The tunnel spat them out into the crew quarters, eerily silent. Beds lay unmade, personal belongings scattered, but no crew remained. It was as though they had vanished mid-step. Rachel rifled through drawers, searching for anything useful. She found a flashlight, half dead but still glowing faintly, and handed it to Elliot. Together they pressed deeper, hearts pounding at every creak. Then they heard it, faint singing, a woman's voice, gentle, sweet, luring. Rachel's throat went dry. "You hear that?" Elliot's face drained of color. "I know that voice." He moved before Rachel could stop him, pushing open a door at the hall's end. Inside was a cabin lit by a single lantern. And there, sitting on the bed, was a woman in a flowing white dress, her hair cascading like silk. Her face was beautiful, serene, her lips curving in a tender smile. Elliot's eyes filled with tears. "Anna?" He stumbled forward, hands outstretched. Rachel's instinct screamed. She grabbed his arm. "No, it's not her." But Elliot shook free, rushing into the room. The woman rose, her arms open. "Elliot," she whispered. "Come to me." For one fleeting moment, Rachel almost believed it. The love in her eyes, the warmth in her tone, it was convincing, perfect. Then the lantern flickered and Rachel saw it. Her skin rippled, shifting. Her mouth stretched wider than humanly possible. And her eyes, black pits, endless, hungry. Rachel screamed, "Elliot, get away!" But it was too late. The woman's arms snapped around him, her fingers digging into his back like talons. Elliot gasped, his body convulsing as his life drained. His eyes met Rachel's one last time, filled with horror and regret. "Run," he mouthed. And then he was gone, his body collapsing into dust that scattered across the floor. The thing turned toward Rachel, its mouth opening in a shriek that shook the walls. Rachel bolted, slamming the door behind her, tears streaming down her face. She ran blindly through corridors that shifted and stretched, until at last she collapsed against another door, chest heaving, vision blurred. She was alone now, utterly, horribly alone, but not for long. The ship whispered to her louder than ever, voices overlapping into a maddening chorus. They called her name, promised her rest, promised her reunion with every soul she had ever lost. She clutched her ears, screaming, "Leave me alone!" The lights above burst, showering sparks. The floor lurched, throwing her to her knees, and then through the chaos a thought pierced her despair. The heart. The heart was the key. Elliot had been right. If she could reach it again, if she could destroy it, maybe she could end this nightmare. Rachel forced herself up, trembling but determined. "Fine," she whispered. "If it wants me, it can choke on me." She began to move, retracing her steps toward the lower decks, toward the chamber that pulsed and whispered. The halls twisted against her. Doors slammed. Figures appeared in her path, some screaming, some weeping, some smiling with mouths too wide. But Rachel pushed through, her mind locked on the single thought of ending it. At last she found the elevator again. Its doors stood open, waiting. She stepped inside. The descent began. The chamber welcomed her with a roar of whispers. The heart pulsed harder, the chains rattling, the stench of salt and rot suffocating. Faces pressed from within, screaming silently, their eyes pleading. Rachel approached, her hands trembling. She searched the room for anything, any tool. Her eyes landed on a jagged length of rusted metal protruding from the wall. She yanked it free, ignoring the slice it left across her palm. The heart throbbed faster, as if it sensed her intent. "Let them go," she screamed, raising the shard. "You've fed enough." And with every ounce of strength she drove the metal into the pulsing flesh. The chamber erupted, the heart convulsed, spraying black ichor across the walls. The whispers turned to screams, deafening, agonized. The ship itself groaned, tilting violently as though in pain. Chains snapped, water poured in through cracks, and the faces within the heart writhed, some breaking free, others dissolving into mist. Rachel wrenched the shard free and struck again. And again. Her arms burned, her vision blurred, but she didn't stop. Each strike sent tremors through the ship. Each strike tore another shriek from the countless voices bound inside. The walls split. Water cascaded in torrents. The chamber shook like an earthquake, beams snapping, metal twisting. Rachel staggered back, the shard slipping from her hands. The heart still pulsed, weaker now, but alive. And then she realized the truth. It wouldn't die. Not fully. Not while it had her. The whispers shifted, focusing, wrapping around her mind like a noose. "One more, just one more. Give yourself and the rest will be free." Her chest heaved. Her tears mixed with the black spray on her face. Could she? Could she sacrifice herself to end it? The ship trembled violently. Passengers' voices cried out in her head, thousands of them. Some begged her to do it. Others screamed for her not to. Rachel's gaze locked on the heart. She stepped forward. Rachel's feet dragged through rising water, her breath ragged as the chamber shook around her. Every step closer to the heart felt like wading through quicksand. The whispers growing heavier, sharper, cutting into her thoughts until she couldn't tell where her mind ended and theirs began. Give yourself. Give yourself. One more soul. One more offering. The heart writhed, throbbing so violently now that veins bulged outward like wriggling serpents, smearing the walls with slick black ichor. Each beat rattled her bones, resonating deep in her chest as though it were syncing with her own pulse. Her legs trembled. Her body begged her to turn and flee, but she didn't. Not anymore. Elliot's face flashed in her mind, the desperate warning, the way his body had turned to dust in that creature's arms. She thought of every terrified scream that still echoed in the ship's corridors, every face pressed against the pulsing flesh, trapped forever. She raised her trembling hands toward the heart. Take me, she whispered, her voice breaking. The chamber exhaled. A hot, foul wind swept through, carrying the stench of decay and brine. The whispers shifted from pleading to joyous, a chorus of hungry celebration. Tendrils burst from the heart, slick and glistening, snaking toward her ankles, her wrists, her throat. They coiled tight, burning her skin, dragging her closer. Rachel screamed, the sound swallowed instantly by the chamber. Her toes left the ground. She was lifted, pulled toward the throbbing mass. Faces within the flesh stretched and pressed outward, grinning, weeping, shrieking, reaching for her. Join us forever. Her chest constricted. The tendrils tightened around her ribs until she felt them crack. Her vision blurred as the heart loomed larger, its surface splitting to reveal a gaping maw lined with jagged, bone-like teeth, dripping with black slime. She was inches from it now, her body trembling, her mind fracturing. And then, something inside her snapped. Not her bones. Her fear. No, she screamed, her voice raw, defiant. You don't get me. You don't get anyone else. With every ounce of strength left in her body, she wrenched one hand free, blood pouring from where the tendrils tore her skin. She seized the shard of rusted metal she had dropped earlier, still glinting faintly in the murky water below, and she drove it, straight into the heart's gaping maw. The reaction was immediate and catastrophic. The chamber erupted with a sound, like 1,000 church bells shattering at once. The tendrils convulsed, flinging her across the room. Her body slammed into the wall, pain exploding across her spine. But she forced herself up, teeth clenched. The heart writhed violently, ichor spraying in torrents. The faces within it screamed in unison, some shattering into mist, others tearing free and evaporating into light. The maw snapped shut, splitting into jagged cracks as if the very flesh of the ship was collapsing inward. Rachel staggered forward again, clutching the shard, screaming with rage and sorrow. She plunged it into the heart once more. And again, each strike sent a shockwave through the ship. Lights above exploded, corridors flooded, steel beams groaned and snapped like bones. The ocean roared, rushing into every crevice as though the sea itself wanted to reclaim what had been stolen. The heart throbbed weaker, the whispers turning frantic, begging now, "Stop, please, we will let you go. We will release them all." Rachel's tears blurred her vision. She struck harder. You should have thought of that before you fed on them. The floor gave way beneath her feet. Water surged up, black and freezing, swallowing her waist, her chest, her neck. She kicked, fighting to stay above the surface. But the current pulled her down toward the heart, as though it refused to die quietly. Rachel screamed bubbles, clawing for breath, but still her hands clutched the shard. Still she struck even as the water swallowed her whole. Darkness. Silence. Crushing pressure. Her lungs burned. Her chest screamed, but her arms moved, mechanical. Relentless. She stabbed until she couldn't see, until she couldn't breathe, until the world faded to black. She expected nothing after that. But something came. Light. Soft. Warm. Golden. Rachel's eyes fluttered open, and for a moment she thought she had died. She floated weightless, the black water gone, her body suspended in a vast ocean of shimmering light. Around her drifted figures, countless figures, men, women, children, their faces serene now, no longer twisted in horror, One by one they smiled at her. Elliot was among them, his arm wrapped around a woman whose face Rachel recognized from his grief. Anna. They nodded to her, gratitude shining in their eyes. Rachel's throat tightened. Tears spilled freely. She wanted to reach for them, to stay in that warm glow forever. But a voice whispered. Not the ship's, not the heart's, but her own. Not yet. You're not done. The light shattered. Rachel gasped, her body convulsing as her lungs filled with air. She lay sprawled across a broken deck, the sky above her split with lightning, rain hammering down in sheets. The ship was in ruins, its structure collapsing into the raging ocean. Fires burned across splintered wood, smoke rising into the storm. She coughed violently, dragging herself upright. Every muscle screamed, every bone felt shattered, but she was alive. Alive. Around her, the faces of the dead were gone. The whispers had fallen silent. The ship moaned like a dying animal, breaking apart at last. Rachel staggered to her feet, clinging to a railing as the deck tilted. A wave crashed over, nearly sweeping her into the sea. She fought forward, eyes locked on the distant shape of a lifeboat barely clinging to its ropes. Her legs moved without thought, survival instinct propelling her. She clawed through debris, through flames, through torrents of black water, until at last she reached it. With trembling fingers, she cut the ropes, the boat crashing into the ocean below. Rachel climbed over the railing. For one terrible moment she hesitated, staring down at the boiling sea, the remnants of the ship groaning behind her. And then she jumped. The plunge stole her breath, the cold piercing like knives, but she fought upward, kicking, clawing, until her hands grasped the edge of the lifeboat. With the last of her strength, she hauled herself inside, collapsing in a trembling heap. The storm raged. The sea swallowed the ship whole, dragging its monstrous body into the abyss. Rachel watched, shivering, as the last of its lights flickered and died beneath the waves, and then silence. Only the rain, the waves, and her own ragged breathing. Rachel lay back, staring at the dark sky, tears mingling with rain. She had survived. Somehow. But as her eyes fluttered shut, one final thought crept into her mind. A thought that chilled her more than the ocean ever could. If the ship had lived so long, feeding for centuries, if it had been destroyed only now, how many others were still out there, waiting beneath the waves? The storm eased by dawn, leaving Rachel adrift on a calm, endless sea. Her lifeboat bobbed gently, the horizon stretching in every direction, gray and featureless. For the first time since she'd boarded the cursed vessel, there was silence. No whispers. No screams. Just the soft slap of water against wood. She sat upright, her body trembling with exhaustion, her throat raw. Every muscle ached, every cut throbbed, but she forced herself to remain awake. Sleep felt dangerous. Sleep meant surrender. Hours blurred together. The sun rose higher, scorching her skin. She had no food, no water, no sense of direction. She drifted in and out of half-conscious haze. Images of the ship flashing in her mind, the pulsing heart, Elliot's desperate face, the screams of the trapped. At some point, she began to hear them again. Not whispers, not the ship, but voices, faint, distant, carried on the waves. Her head snapped up. She blinked, shielding her eyes from the sun. Far in the distance, she saw it. A ship, gleaming white, massive and modern, cutting gracefully across the horizon. Rachel's chest lurched. A cruise ship. Another one. She stood, wobbling, nearly tipping the lifeboat. She screamed until her voice cracked, waving her arms desperately. Help, please! Over here! The ship drew closer, its engines thrumming. At last, a voice boomed through a megaphone. We see you. Hold on, we're sending help! Rachel collapsed into sobs, relief flooding her. She was saved. She was truly saved. They pulled her aboard, wrapped her in blankets, pressed water bottles to her lips. Crew members hovered, eyes wide with concern, asking her questions she could barely answer. Where did you come from? What happened to your ship? Are there any other survivors? Rachel shook her head weakly. No, it's gone. All gone. They exchanged glances, muttering in hushed tones. She didn't care. She was safe. For the first time in days, maybe weeks, she allowed herself to close her eyes and rest. But peace didn't last long. That night, she woke screaming. The cabin walls pressed in, the air thick with salt. She swore she heard the ship groan, the same way that ship had groaned before it died. She pressed her palms to her ears, sobbing, but the whispers still wormed into her mind. Not gone. Never gone. She staggered from her bed, stumbling into the corridor. The new cruise ship was eerily quiet, the halls dim, empty. Too empty. She realized with a shiver that she hadn't seen any passengers since boarding. Only crew. Her heart hammered. She moved slowly, her bare feet silent on the carpet. Every door she passed was locked, sealed. At the end of the corridor, she heard it. Soft music. A violin! Her breath caught. She followed the sound, trembling, until she reached a grand lounge bathed in golden light, and there in the center stood a man in a crisp uniform, his back to her, playing a mournful tune. "Hello?" Rachel whispered. The man stopped playing. Slowly, too slowly, he turned. His face was pale, his eyes hollow. His smile stretched unnaturally wide. Rachel's stomach turned. She stumbled back, but the lounge doors slammed shut behind her. The man tilted his head. His voice was not his own, it was dozens, hundreds, overlapping in a ghastly chorus. "Did you really think it was over?" Rachel screamed. The lounge dissolved around her, walls melting like wax, revealing black water pouring in through jagged cracks. The floor tilted, furniture sliding into the flood. The man's body twisted, bones snapping, limbs elongating until he loomed impossibly tall, his uniform hanging in tatters. Rachel fled, water sloshing around her ankles, rising fast. She crashed through door after door, each opening into another nightmare. Corridors that stretched into darkness, staircases that spiraled endlessly, cabins filled with lifeless passengers sitting upright, smiling with empty eyes. She clutched her head, sobbing. "No, no, no! I destroyed it! I killed you!" The chorus followed her, echoing through every hall. You cannot kill what the sea has claimed. One ship falls, another rises. One heart dies, another awakens. Rachel stumbled into the open deck. The ocean spread before her, endless and black. And on the horizon she saw them. Not one ship. Dozens. Hundreds. Massive silhouettes drifting silently across the waves, their lights flickering like dying stars. Her knees buckled. Her stomach dropped. Every one of them. Alive. Every one of them hungry. The sea wasn't dotted with ships, it was infested. Rachel fell to her knees, her scream swallowed by the night. Rachel's scream tore across the deck, but the ocean gave nothing back. The fleet of ships loomed larger, their lights blinking erratically like watchful eyes. One by one their horns bellowed, a deep, mournful sound that rattled her bones. The water churned violently as though the sea itself was responding to their call. Her lifeboat rescue. It hadn't been salvation. It had been bait. A lure dragging her into a wider web. Rachel staggered to her feet, clutching the railing. The crew from earlier appeared behind her, but now their faces were wrong. Their eyes glowed faintly, their jaws slack, and seawater dribbled from their mouths. They walked in perfect unison, silent but for the wet squelch of their steps. Rachel backed toward the bow, her pulse racing. "Stay away from me." The nearest crewman tilted his head, seawater spilling from his ears. When he spoke, it was in that same layered chorus. "You woke us all, Rachel. You tore one heart apart, but in doing so, you fed the sea. And now it knows you?" Rachel's skin crawled. Her hands grasped blindly for anything, a rope, a weapon, a chance. The crew advanced. Their mouths opened wider than human jaws should allow, black eels writhing inside, snapping their needle teeth. Rachel bolted, sprinting across the slick deck, her lungs burning. The ship's lights flickered, plunging her into brief intervals of darkness. Each time they flared back, the crew was closer, their movements jerky, unnatural. She rounded a corner and froze. A ballroom stretched before her, glittering chandeliers swaying violently. Tables were set for dinner, silverware gleaming, glasses full of dark red liquid that smelled of salt and iron. Passengers filled the chairs. Motionless, their faces turned toward her. Then, as one, they smiled. The chorus swelled. "Feast." The passengers rose, scraping their chairs back in unison. Their bodies moved stiffly, bones cracking as if they hadn't walked in decades. They shuffled forward, hundreds of them blocking every path. Rachel's chest heaved. Panic clawed at her throat. She turned, desperate, only to find the crew had followed, sealing off her escape. Trapped. The chandelier above groaned. Its chain snapped. The massive fixture crashed to the floor, scattering glass and sparks. Rachel seized the chance, darting through the chaos, pushing past bodies that clawed at her arms. Fingers tore at her skin, leaving bloody trails, but she forced her way forward. She burst into a side hallway, slamming the door shut behind her. Her hands shook violently, blood slicking her palms. Her mind reeled. This wasn't one ship. It wasn't even a fleet. It was an entire graveyard. A living cemetery of vessels all bound to the same endless hunger. And she had become their beacon. Hours blurred again. Rachel stumbled through twisting corridors that never led the same way twice. Sometimes she ended up back where she started. Other times she found herself in places no modern ship should have. A Victorian parlor, a rusted war deck, a cabin lit by gas lamps. Every style, every era, fused together as though the sea had collected ships across centuries and stitched them into one endless labyrinth. Her reflection appeared often, on windows, mirrors, polished floors. But it was never right. Sometimes it smiled when she didn't. Sometimes it turned to face her when she wasn't looking. Once it pressed its hand against the glass, mouthing words she couldn't hear. She smashed that mirror with her fist. At last, she found herself on another deck, the ocean yawning around her. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the hulking silhouettes of the ghostly fleet. And then she saw it. In the distance, one ship was different, smaller, flickering with a faint blue light instead of sickly yellow. It looked alive, real, human. Rachel's chest lurched. Could it be another rescue? A real one? She cupped her hands, screaming into the storm. "Help, please. I'm here." The blue-lit ship turned slightly, its bow facing her. A horn bellowed, low and mournful, but somehow warm. Hope sparked in her chest, but then movement. The black fleet shifted, closing ranks around it like predators circling prey. The sea roiled as tendrils, massive and slick, rose from the water. Curling around the glowing ship, Rachel's hope shattered. The blue-lit vessel struggled, its lights flickering desperately. But the black ships pressed tighter. The tendrils dragged it down, splintering its hull, extinguishing its glow. Its final horn blast cut off mid-note, swallowed by the sea. Rachel fell to her knees, sobbing. "No, no, no, no." The chorus swelled again, laughter woven through the sound. "There is no rescue, only us." The fleet's lights blinked in unison, forming patterns across the horizon like eyes opening and closing. Watching her, choosing her. And in that instant, Rachel knew. She wasn't just another victim. She was being kept alive. The ships wanted her to see. They wanted her to despair. They wanted her to join them willingly. Rachel pressed her palms to her skull, screaming into the storm. Her voice cracked, raw with rage and grief. "I will never be yours." Lightning split the sky again. For a brief moment, she saw her own reflection in the black waves below. But it wasn't hers. It was smiling. Rachel's reflection lingered on the surface of the black waves, grinning back at her long after the lightning had faded. The storm quieted as though the sea itself were holding its breath, waiting for her next move. She tore her gaze away, stumbling backward across the slick deck, clutching the railing until her knuckles bled. Her breath came in ragged bursts, her chest heaving. The chorus followed, soft and mocking. "You cannot run forever. You are ours already. The sea has chosen you." Rachel pressed her palms to her ears, but the voices came from inside her skull. She slammed her head against the railing, desperate to drive them out, but they only laughed. Something cracked overhead. She looked up just as the mast split down the middle, wood groaning, wires snapping. The structure toppled, crashing onto the deck, missing her by mere feet. Splinters rained down like daggers, one slicing across her cheek. Warm blood mixed with cold rain. She staggered toward the bow, slipping on slick boards, her mind spinning with one thought. She couldn't let them win. She couldn't let herself become part of this. But where could she go? The ship surrounded her, endless, eternal. The ocean offered no escape unless... Rachel's eyes darted to the lifeboats. One remained, hanging by frayed ropes on the starboard side. Her pulse surged. It was madness. Where could she possibly go except back into the endless sea? But madness was better than surrender. She sprinted, her bare feet slapping against the deck. Behind her, the chorus grew louder, furious. "Do not leave. Do not resist. Belong." Figures emerged from the shadows, crew and passengers alike, their jaws hanging open, seawater pouring from their mouths. They lurched toward her, too many to fight. Rachel snatched a broken spar from the deck, swinging it wildly. It cracked against skulls, splintered against ribs, but the figures didn't fall. They reached with claw-like fingers, tearing at her arms, her clothes. She roared, shoving through the lifeboat just feet away. With trembling hands, she cut the last rope, the boat dropping into the churning water below. Without hesitation, she leapt. The fall knocked the wind from her lungs. She hit the sea hard, the cold slicing into her like knives. Salt water filled her mouth as waves dragged her under. She fought upward, thrashing until her hands caught the edge of the lifeboat. With sheer desperation, she hauled herself inside. The current seized the boat instantly, dragging it away from the towering ship. Rachel collapsed inside, coughing, shivering, her chest on fire. She lay on her back, gasping, the world spinning. For a moment, just a moment, there was silence. Then she saw them. The fleet. From her low vantage, the horizon was filled with impossible silhouettes. Ships from every era drifted side by side. Rusting warships, opulent liners, half-sunken ferries, ghostly yachts. Their lights blinked in strange rhythms, like signals, like language. They were communicating, watching, deciding. Rachel's throat tightened. She clutched the sides of the boat, whispering to herself, "Keep moving. Just keep moving. Don't look back." The current carried her deeper into the fleet. The towering hulls loomed above like cliffs, their shadows swallowing her. She heard groans of shifting steel, saw faces pressed against portholes, faces that should have been dead centuries ago. One ship drifted so close she could read its name. Aurora Belle, 1893. Its wood was rotten, its sails shredded, but the lanterns along its deck burned brightly with unnatural flame. Figures lined the railings, staring down at her with hollow eyes. Another loomed behind it, massive and modern, its name painted in gleaming white, Paradise Voyager. Its decks were immaculate, but no sound of life stirred. Only silence, heavy and expectant. Rachel's boat passed between them, a mouse through giants. She shivered violently, salt burning her lips, rain matting her hair. She whispered prayers to God she didn't believe in, begged for any hand, any miracle. None came. Hours passed, or minutes, or days. Time bent here, twisted by the sea's hunger. Rachel's body grew weaker. Her vision blurred. Every muscle screamed. Sleep pressed against her eyelids like lead, and then she heard it again. Music. Faint at first, like a lullaby carried on the wind. A piano, soft and sweet. A voice humming along. Rachel's heart clenched. She sat upright, eyes darting. The sound drifted from the nearest ship, a smaller vessel with peeling paint, its deck lit by a single lantern. The music grew louder, clearer, heartbreakingly beautiful. She felt herself reaching toward it before she realized what she was doing. Her boat drifted closer, drawn as though by invisible current. On the deck, a figure appeared, a woman in a flowing gown, her back turned. She sat at a grand piano, fingers dancing across keys that gleamed despite the decay around them. Her voice carried on the wind, haunting and tender. Rachel's throat tightened. She wanted to cry. It sounded like her mother's lullabies, like the songs she hadn't heard since childhood. The woman turned slowly. Her face was wrong. The lower half was missing. Her jaw torn away, her throat a gaping wound that still sang perfectly. Rachel screamed, scrambling back in the lifeboat. The woman's head tilted, her hollow song warping into laughter. The piano's keys cracked and splintered, black ichor pouring between them. The chorus swelled, echoing across every ship. You cannot leave the song. You are part of the song. Rachel seized the oars, rowing wildly though her muscles burned like fire. The lifeboat spun away from the singing ship, waves crashing against its sides. The chorus followed her, voices overlapping, mocking, coaxing. Row, little survivor. Row deeper into us. We are endless. We are forever. Rachel's tears blurred her vision, but she rowed until her hands bled, until blisters tore open, until the lifeboat drifted free of that lantern's glow. But she knew she wasn't free. She would never be free because the fleet was endless, and somewhere among them something was waiting, something worse than the heart she had destroyed. The fleet pressed tighter around her, their hulls shifting in unnatural silence as though the ocean itself conspired to hurt her. Rachel's breath steamed in the freezing night, her arms trembling with each pull of the oars. She didn't know if she was rowing away from danger or straight into its heart, but instinct screamed that stopping meant death. The sky offered no comfort. Clouds hung low, suffocating the stars. Lightning spidered across the heavens without thunder, illuminating the ships in stark flashes. Rust-eaten cruisers, bloated ferries, pleasure yachts slick with algae. Each bore the same expressionless watchers, their faces pale moons staring down from railings and windows. Rachel's lifeboat scraped against something submerged. She jolted, nearly toppling overboard. Peering down, she saw pale arms stretched from beneath the waves, hundreds of them, hands reaching for her boat. Their fingers brushed the hull, desperate and blind, as if clawing to climb aboard. She rowed harder, tears streaming from her eyes. One hand breached the surface, grasping the side of the lifeboat. It belonged to a child, its small wrist snapped, skin peeling back like wet paper. Its eyes, milky and lidless, found hers. "Help me," it gurgled, water pouring from its mouth. Rachel screamed, slamming her oar down until the fingers broke apart like brittle twigs. The body sank, replaced instantly by another, then another. They clung to the boat, mouths opening in a silent wail. The lifeboat rocked violently under their weight. Rachel swung wildly, smashing oar against bone until one by one they slipped back beneath the surface, leaving only ripples. Her chest heaved, her throat raw. The fleet remained unmoved. A horn blasted through the night. It wasn't the mournful call of any ship she knew. It was deeper, older, like the bellow of something buried under centuries of stone. The sound vibrated in her bones, rattled her teeth. The water stilled. Every ship in the fleet turned its bow simultaneously, aligning as if obeying a single command. Their lights flickered in unison. The air pressed heavy on Rachel's chest, and she felt in her marrow that she had entered the true heart of this place. Ahead, the horizon split open. What she had thought was cloud and storm revealed itself as something far larger, a ship so colossal it dwarfed all others, its hull stretching into the darkness, its masts vanishing into cloud. The sea itself bowed beneath its weight, waves curving inward as if drawn to worship. Its name was carved into its side in letters taller than cathedrals: Leviathan Eternal. Rachel's pulse slammed in her ears. Her lifeboat was being pulled toward it, the current merciless. She dug the oars into the water, screaming with effort, but the pull was too strong. The smaller ships parted like sentinels, forming a corridor to guide her in. Their passengers raised their arms in unison, voices rising in chorus. "The heart is gone. The vessel comes. The vessel must be filled." Rachel sobbed, choking on salt. Her arms gave out. The oars slipped from her hands, swallowed by the sea. She collapsed in the lifeboat, whispering, "No, no, no." The Leviathan loomed larger with each heartbeat. Its hull was not steel or wood, but something alive. Flesh fused with barnacle, bone carved into spires. Eyes opened along its surface, weeping black tears that ran down into the sea. The lifeboat slammed against its side. A ladder unfurled, woven of tendon and rope. It dangled just within reach. Rachel knew what it meant. She could climb, or she could let the sea claim her here. But she had seen what the sea held. With a broken sob, she grabbed the ladder and began to climb. The air on the deck was thicker, foul with the stench of rot. Rachel staggered onto the boards, which pulsed faintly beneath her feet, alive with something she couldn't comprehend. The deck was vast, stretching farther than her eyes could follow. Thousands of figures stood in neat rows, facing inward, silent and unmoving. Their bodies were in every state of decay, some skeletons dressed in scraps of uniform, others fresh and dripping, as though drowned minutes before. At the far end of the deck, a throne rose from the wood itself, carved from ribs and vertebrae. Upon it sat a figure cloaked in shadow. Rachel's knees buckled. Her breath seized. The figure leaned forward. Its face was hidden beneath a hood, but she felt its gaze pierce every part of her. "You killed the heart," it said. Its voice was the chorus, condensed, layered with 1,000 tones. "You stole what was ours," Rachel shook her head violently. "I didn't choose this. I didn't want this." The figure rose. It was impossibly tall, its limbs stretching like rigging across the deck. As it moved, the passengers turned their heads in perfect unison to watch. "You will replace what you destroyed," it said. Rachel's stomach dropped. No, I won't. I'd rather die." The figure tilted its head. "Death is a door. We own every door." The passengers stepped forward, their mouths opening. From their throats poured the same song she had heard before, now deafening, rattling her skull. The melody wrapped around her, pressing into her veins, her lungs, her heart. Rachel clutched her chest, screaming as her pulse faltered, sinking with the rhythm. Her vision blurred with black. She fell to her knees, nails clawing at the boards, desperate to resist. The figure extended one long, skeletal hand. "Rise, vessel. Become the song." Rachel's last scream tore through the night, but no echo returned. The fleet roared its approval. Rachel's scream dissolved into the song. It left her lips without her permission, weaving perfectly into the chorus as though her throat had always belonged to them. The passengers swayed, their hollow eyes fixed on her, their decomposed mouths moving in time. "No," she tried to shout, but the word broke apart, reshaped into notes. Her body convulsed, bones cracking, muscles spasming as though invisible strings pulled them taut. She clawed at her throat until blood smeared her fingers, but the melody poured out undisturbed. The figure stepped closer, each stride resonating through the deck like a drumbeat. Its shadow swallowed her, taller than the mast. The hood fell back. It was no face. Only an expansive sea, endless and dark, churning within the hollow of a skull. Waves rose and broke inside it, ships sinking in miniature storms. Lightning forked across the void where eyes should be. Rachel's mind fractured. She wept, her tears lost in the torrent of rain. "You will be our vessel," the chorus thundered, "and through you the fleet will never hunger again." The throne behind the figure pulsed, and the deck split open. A pit yawned at Rachel's knees, revealing a cavern of writhing organs beneath the planks. Hearts, hundreds of them, beating weakly in the dark. Some were human. Some belonged to creatures she couldn't name. All pumped black ichor into veins that ran through the ship's flesh. One heart space lay empty, gaping and waiting. Rachel knew it was hers. "No." She shrieked, fighting against the melody, forcing her voice into something jagged and broken. She staggered to her feet, stumbling toward the pit's edge. The figure raised its hand. The passengers surged forward. Rachel ran. She vaulted over bodies, dodged grasping hands. The song chased her, thickening the air, twisting her limbs. She stumbled, slammed into the railing, and saw the sea roiling far below. Lightning revealed faces in the waves, faces of everyone she had ever known. Grinning, beckoning. Behind her, the figure's voice boomed, "You cannot flee. We are the ocean. We are every horizon. You belong." Rachel spat blood, her body trembling. "Then take me as I am," she whispered, and she hurled herself over the railing. The fall ripped the scream from her chest. Salt water engulfed her, crushing her lungs, driving knives into her ears. She thrashed wildly, bubbles escaping in silver bursts, but the weight dragged her deeper. Hands caught her wrists. Dozens of them, then hundreds. The drowned dead pulled her down, their eyes glowing faintly in the black. Their mouths opened in silence, the song vibrating through the water. Rachel fought, kicking, clawing, but their grip was unbreakable. Her chest burned. Spots clouded her vision. She knew she couldn't last, and then she saw it. Far beneath, at the ocean floor, the truth pulsed. The Leviathan's roots stretched endlessly downward, fused with bone and wreckage. An eye the size of a city opened beneath the hull, staring up at her. In its reflection, she saw the entire fleet bound like parasites, each ship a nerve, each drowned soul a cell. The fleet was no gathering of ghosts. It was a body, and Rachel was being carried to its heart. She blacked out. When she opened her eyes, she lay on a deck slick with brine. Her chest ached, but she was alive, or something close. Her veins glowed faintly beneath her skin, black threads winding through them. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears, too strong, too fast. The chorus hummed inside her, quieter now but constant, like breath. She staggered upright. The ship she stood on was not the Leviathan. It was smaller, a rust-rotted ferry whose nameplate read Ocean Pearl. Yet the passengers moved in sync with her steps. When she lifted her hand, so did they. When she gasped, their chests heaved in unison. Horror flooded her. She stumbled backward, shaking her head. No, this isn't me." But deep inside, the truth pulsed. The fleet had accepted her. Rachel was no longer prey. She was part of it. The night pressed on, and the ships groaned with a new hunger. Somewhere beyond the endless horizon, Rachel felt the tug of fresh lives. Cruise liners full of laughter and music, unaware they were sailing into a maw. And though she wept, though she screamed within her skull, her body leaned forward, her new heart beating in perfect time with the Leviathan Eternal. The fleet began to move, and Rachel, screaming, resisting, failing, led them. The ocean was unnaturally calm. Not a ripple stirred the black mirror of water as the fleet drifted, thousands of ships moving in unison. From above, it must have looked like a plague spreading across the sea, swallowing horizon after horizon. Rachel stood at the bow of the Ocean Pearl. Her hands clutched the rusted railing until flakes of metal cut her palms. She tried not to breathe because every breath wasn't hers anymore, it was theirs. Each inhale dragged in the song. Each exhale loosed it again into the night. And now she felt it. A tremor, faint but unmistakable. Life. To the east, beyond the curtain of mist, engines hummed. Music drifted faintly across the water, human laughter rolling like warmth through the dark. The living, her stomach clenched. She tried to scream, to force her throat into words, but the chorus drowned her. She shook her head violently, clawing at her own neck, but the voices only laughed inside her skull. The fleet turned in perfect unison toward the sound. Their lights blinked in rhythm, lanterns and portholes flickering like a heartbeat. The water beneath them surged, propelling them forward without wind, without engines. The mist parted. Rachel's knees buckled. A modern cruise liner glittered in the night, taller than most of the cursed fleet combined. Bright lights burned across its decks, illuminating crowds of passengers in swimsuits, tuxedos, and dresses. Music throbbed from speakers. Fireworks exploded above its funnels, scattering sparks across the waves. Rachel wanted to vomit. She wanted to claw her eyes out. These people had no idea. "No," she rasped, fighting against the chorus. "Don't do this. Don't." The fleet surged closer. The liner's name blazed across its side in neon blue. Celestial Majesty. On the top deck of the Majesty, a wedding reception was in full swing. A bride in a gown shimmering with crystals twirled beneath string lights, her veil catching the ocean breeze. Guests clapped and cheered, champagne glasses raised high. The groom laughed, pulling his wife close for another dance. The DJ's music thumped, the sea reflecting colored lights in gentle ripples. Children darted between tables with sparklers in hand, their shrieks of joy cutting the night. None of them noticed the mist creeping in. None of them saw the shadows rising on the horizon. Rachel screamed within her skull, but her lips parted into the song instead, the melody lacing through the air. The passengers of the fleet echoed her, their hollow mouths opening wide, their chorus rolling across the waves like a tide. The music on the Majesty faltered. Guests turned, confusion knitting their brows. Some smiled nervously, assuming another ship was nearby, some celebration blending into theirs. Then the mist thinned, and the fleet appeared. Thousands of vessels, black and rotting, silent except for their terrible harmony. They loomed on every side, their hulls blotting out the horizon. Lanterns burned with colors no flame should hold, casting the wedding party in an alien glow. Laughter died. The bride's smile faltered. Children stopped mid-run, staring open-mouthed at the armada surrounding them. "What the hell?" the groom whispered. The chorus swelled, rattling the glasses, making the deck tremble, and then the first light on the Majesty flickered out. Rachel's heart tore itself against her ribs. She dug her nails into the railing until they split, but she could not stop. Her song grew loud, pulling the living ship closer. Passengers on the Majesty screamed as their vessel shuddered. The ocean beneath it boiled, waves rising unnaturally high. Drinks toppled, tables skidded, fireworks froze mid-spark. The bride clutched her husband. "What's happening?" The groom could only stare as skeletal hands erupted from the pool on the upper deck, dragging themselves onto the tiles. Guests shrieked as waterlogged figures in tattered uniforms staggered forward, eyes glowing faint blue. The dead had boarded. Rachel fell to her knees. Tears streaked her face, salt mixing with salt. She forced her hands together in prayer, though no god had ever listened. "Please," she begged inside her skull. "Not them. Not tonight. Take me instead. Take me." The Leviathan's voice thundered inside her bones. "You are already taken. You are ours. Lead them." And she did. Her voice broke the night, terrible and beautiful, guiding the drowned horde as they spilled onto the Majesty. Guests scattered, some hurling themselves over the rail only to find the sea filled with pale arms waiting. Others fought, striking with bottles, chairs, fists, but the dead did not fall. Children screamed for their parents. Parents vanished beneath waves of grasping hands. The bride's veil tore as skeletal fingers wrapped her throat. She shrieked, clawing as the groom battered the thing with a champagne bottle, shattering glass across its skull. It didn't bleed. It only turned its eyeless sockets toward him, and then the floor beneath them split. Black water erupted, sweeping half the reception into the sea. The DJ's speakers drowned, their chords sparking briefly before silence swallowed the music. Only the song remained. Rachel howled against it, forcing her throat raw, but the fleet sang louder. Her body shook violently, every nerve on fire. The celestial majesty tilted. Its lights went dark. Screams rose, then gurgled, then fell silent, and the fleet fed. Hours later, the sea was calm again. The wedding deck floated in pieces, flowers and streamers drifting like carrion. No voices cried. No music played. Only one sound lingered, Rachel's sobbing. The fleet moved on, silent and sated. The majesty was gone, claimed by the Leviathan. Rachel's tears fell into the sea. She tried to cover her ears, but the chorus was inside her now, in her marrow, her blood. Her throat ached with every stolen note. She looked up at the sky, begging for dawn. It never came. The horizon should have brightened by now. Rachel knew hours had passed, but the sky remained pinned in eternal night, as if dawn had been outlawed. The fleet glided onward in silence, their hulls gleaming faintly with rot and rust, their passengers still swaying in unison. Rachel clung to the railing of the Ocean Pearl, her body trembling. She wanted to vomit, but her stomach was hollow. She wanted to scream, but her voice was no longer hers. Each sound she made emerged twisted, woven into the endless hymn of the drowned. She stared at her bloodied hands. She had clawed them raw during the slaughter, but the wounds had already sealed, threads of black creeping beneath her skin. She wasn't healing, she was becoming. No, she whispered, forcing the word through gritted teeth. It came out distorted, half melody, half sob. I'm still me. I'm still me. But deep within, another heartbeat answered, not hers, the Leviathan. Below deck, she heard footsteps, shuffling, synchronized. She descended a rusted staircase, her hands brushing damp walls that pulsed faintly as though alive. The corridor stretched impossibly long, lined with cabins whose doors hung open. Inside each cabin sat passengers. Not dead, not alive. Their faces slack, their eyes blind, but their mouths whispered fragments of the song. Some cradled objects from their old lives. Wedding rings, photographs, toys. Clutching them until the flesh wore away. Rachel's stomach turned. She moved past them quickly, her chest tightening with each step. At the end of the corridor, a mirror stood propped against the wall. She froze. Her reflection blinked a moment too late. Its lips curled into a smile she hadn't made. Behind her reflection, the cabins were empty, the ship abandoned. You are no longer separate, the reflection sang. You are chorus. You are fleet. Rachel smashed the glass with her fist. It shattered, spilling black water onto the floor. But as the shards clattered, each fragment still showed her face, smiling, singing. She fled back to the deck, gasping, her heart pounding. The fleet slowed. Rachel looked up. Ahead, an island rose from the mist. Its cliffs were jagged, its beaches black with ash. Ancient stone ruins crowned its peak, half swallowed by jungle. For the first time, the chorus quieted. The ships drifted to a halt, their lanterns dimming. The passengers stood still, silent, waiting. Rachel's throat tightened. The silence was worse than the song. The Leviathan's voice rolled through her skull. Home! Rachel staggered, clutching her head. No, not home. I don't belong here. But the fleet moved again, carrying her toward the island. The water around it churned thick with bones, skulls bobbing like buoys. Statues jutted from the shallows. Colossal figures of faceless gods, their stone arms raised as though in welcome. The Ocean Pearl scraped against jagged rocks, anchoring itself without anchor or chain. Gangplanks extended on their own, stretching to meet the shore. The passengers filed off in silence, hundreds of them, marching into the jungle. Rachel felt her legs move before she commanded them. She fought, digging her nails into the railing, but her body strained forward, desperate to follow. She bit her own lip until blood ran, grounding herself with pain. For a moment, just a moment, her legs stilled, and she saw her chance. A lifeboat clung to the side of the ship, half-rotted but afloat. Rachel's pulse surged. She scrambled down the ladder, teeth clenched, every step fighting the pull of the Leviathan. She dropped into the boat, cutting its rope with a shard of broken wood. The current seized it instantly. Rachel rowed with her bare hands, salt burning her eyes, the island shrinking behind her. Her chest heaved with desperate hope. But the sea didn't let her go. The water thickened, clinging to the oars, dragging the boat in circles. The horizon never came closer. She rowed until her skin tore, until her arms trembled uselessly, but she remained fixed beneath the eternal night. A laugh rolled across the water, vast and guttural, the Leviathan's voice. "You cannot leave. Every wave is ours." Rachel collapsed, sobbing. The boat rocked gently, mocking her effort, and then she saw them. Bodies floated around her, dozens, hundreds, their faces upturned, their eyes open and glowing faintly. They circled her boat in silence, their mouths just barely moving, whispering her name. Rachel, her breath caught. She turned slowly. Every face was familiar. Her parents, her sister, her childhood friends, teachers, co-workers, strangers she'd brushed past in crowded streets. All dead, all staring at her. Her mother's lips parted. "Join us, darling," Rachel screamed until her throat bled. When she opened her eyes again, she was back on the Ocean Pearl. The lifeboat was gone. The island loomed closer. The Leviathan's voice coiled through her skull. "You cannot flee, vessel. You are the chorus now. You are our mouth. You are our heart." Rachel fell to her knees, trembling, broken, and far beyond the horizon she felt it again, life. Another ship sailing blindly toward the maw. The fleet stirred, and Rachel, no matter how violently she shook her head, no matter how bitterly she wept, rose to lead them once more. The fleet drifted like a single body, and Rachel felt every inch of it inside her veins. Each hull groaning against the tide was a muscle fiber pulling taut. Each lantern's glow was a pulse behind her eyes. Every drowned throat humming belonged to her now, but inside somewhere deep she still resisted. A scrap of her remained, clawing against the tide of voices, whispering, "I am not yours. I am not fleet." The Leviathan laughed whenever she thought it. The sound rumbled through her marrow. Ahead, the island's cliffs glistened as though slick with blood. The ruins that crowned its peak grew sharper, more defined, stone spires stabbing the black sky. Torches blazed within, green and unnatural, casting long shadows down to the water. The passengers of the Ocean Pearl filed silently down the gangplank, joining the endless procession of the drowned. Rachel's body lurched forward, eager to follow, but she forced her hands to claw into the railing. Rust tore her palms, but pain kept her tethered. "No," she growled through clenched teeth, her voice half song, half human. "Not yet. Not ever." The Leviathan's answer rolled like thunder. "Every resistance strengthens us. Every denial makes the chorus louder." Rachel squeezed her eyes shut. She tried to summon a memory. Any memory not soaked in salt or blood. Her sister's laugh. Sunlight through kitchen windows. The smell of coffee. For a moment she felt human. Then the ocean surged and the memory drowned. The ruins were not ruins at all. Rachel saw them clearly as the fleet moored around the island. The structures pulsed with veins of light, their stones alive, carved from something that still bled. Towers bent inward, forming a circle around a vast pit at the island's center. From that pit rose a sound older than the sea, a low vibration that made the very air tremble. The drowned marched into it, vanishing into the black. Their voices didn't fade. They joined the vibration, feeding it. Rachel's body twitched forward, muscles rebelling. Her fingers slipped from the railing. She staggered, caught herself, dug her nails into the metal until they broke. Her reflection shimmered in the water below, but it wasn't her. It smiled. Its mouth moved in perfect rhythm to the song. Its eyes glowed with Leviathan fire. "You can't hold out forever," it crooned. "When you give in, it will be so sweet." Rachel spat into the sea, though the reflection only laughed. Then the tremor came again. Life. Far across the horizon, a freighter cut through the mist. Its deck lights glowed warm and steady, its engines thundering. Rachel felt the heartbeat of its crew, dozens of them, alive, unaware, fragile. The fleet shifted as one. Lanterns flickered awake. The chorus rose like a tide. Rachel screamed inside her skull, but her throat betrayed her, loosing the melody into the air. The ships surged forward. "No, stop," she begged, but her voice came out as harmony. Her body shook violently, torn between will and command. The freighter's captain saw them too late. His binoculars slipped from his hands as he shouted orders, engines roaring, crew scattering across the deck. But the sea turned thick, choking the propellers. The vessel slowed as though trapped in syrup. The first of the drowned scaled its hull, water sheeting off their rotted uniforms. The crew fought, wrenches, knives, flare guns, but every blow landed in silence. The dead climbed and climbed, endless. Rachel watched with horror as the freighter's horn bellowed, a final desperate warning swallowed by the night. She tried to close her eyes, but the Leviathan forced them open. She saw everything. Throats torn out, screams silenced, bodies dragged beneath the waves. The freighter tilted, its lights winking out one by one, until it sank into the endless maw. The fleet fed again, and Rachel sang. When it was over, she collapsed to the deck, blood streaming from her nose, her throat raw. She curled into herself, sobbing. Why? She rasped. Why me? The Leviathan's voice slithered inside her skull. Because you fought. Because you refused. That defiance made you strong, and strength is ours to claim. Rachel clutched her chest. She could feel the new heart inside her, not hers, not human. It beat in rhythm with the Leviathan, tethering her to the fleet. But deep inside, beneath the chorus, a flicker remained. A thought. A seed. If her defiance had made her strong enough to be chosen, maybe her defiance could make her strong enough to break free. Her lips curled into a smile, small and bitter. You made a mistake, she whispered. And for the first time, the Leviathan did not laugh. The chorus never slept. Even when the fleet drifted silent on black water, the song murmured like blood in Rachel's ears. She tried to shut it out, humming off key, biting her tongue until she tasted iron, but the harmony always smoothed her defiance into rhythm. And yet, there were cracks. When she whispered memories, names, fragments of her old life, the music faltered for a heartbeat. When she forced herself to remember being Rachel, not Vessel, the drowned stumbled for half a step, like puppets with tangled strings. The Leviathan noticed. You weaken yourself, it growled, the voice shaking her ribcage. Why fight? You are eternal now. You are infinite, Rachel spat into the wind. If I'm infinite, then I've got time to destroy you. The laughter that followed rattled the masts. The fleet prowled the world's forgotten lanes. Tankers, freighters, fishing boats, each was hunted, consumed, folded into the body. Every new heart Rachel felt pumping inside her veins made her gag. Each scream etched itself on her mind. But then came the cruise liner. Bright as a floating city, decked with neon and laughter, it cut across the water, oblivious to the death clouding the horizon. Rachel felt it before she saw it. 1,000 living pulses, carefree and warm. A feast unlike any the Leviathan had claimed in years. The fleet surged. Lanterns ignited. Voices rose. No, Rachel hissed, clutching the rail until her knuckles bled. Not them. The Leviathan's answer thundered. Especially them. The liner's music reached them first, pop songs blasting from the pool deck, cheers and clinking glasses. Passengers danced beneath fairy lights, blind to the armada gliding silently toward them. Rachel's throat opened against her will, her voice latching onto the melody, twisting it. Slowly, the cruise ship's speakers warped, the cheerful beat dissolving into discordant echoes. Dancers stumbled, ears ringing. The party dimmed. Confusion spread, then terror. The fog rolled in thick as cement. The first drowned clambered aboard, dripping salt and rot. Passengers screamed, scattering, but for every corridor they fled into, the drowned already waited. Rachel wept as she felt them die. But then, something inside her snapped. Her grief turned sharp, molten. For the first time, her scream didn't blend with the chorus. It tore through it. The drowned around her staggered, hands flying to their ears. The fleet's lights flickered. The Leviathan's voice roared in rage. What have you done? Rachel screamed again, louder, rawer, pouring every memory, every shred of her humanity into it. And the song cracked. For a heartbeat, the chorus faltered. Passengers broke free, shoving past stunned drowned. A few lifeboats hit the water, splashing away into the mist. Rachel fell to her knees, shaking, her throat shredded. Blood poured from her mouth, but she smiled through it. She had hurt the Leviathan. She had bought lives. You will regret this, the Leviathan thundered, its rage boiling the sea. We will hollow you until only our voice remains. Rachel coughed, spitting crimson onto the deck. Then hollow me. But know this, I'll keep screaming until I shatter your bones. The fleet reeled but steadied. The liner still burned. The dead still fed. Yet the Leviathan had been wounded. For the first time, Rachel had proof. It was not invincible. And deep in her chest, beneath the cursed heart, her human one still beat. Weak, ragged, but hers. The sea lay heavy and black, the stars drowned beneath clouds that never shifted. Rachel stood at the bow of the ocean pearl, her body trembling from the scream that had cracked the chorus. Every muscle in her felt shredded, but deep in her chest, the small flame of defiance burned brighter. She had heard it. The Leviathan seethed. Its voice vibrated through every plank, every lantern, every drowned throat. You imagine victory because a few worms escaped? Child, we have fed for centuries. One breath cannot undo eternity. Rachel clenched her fists. If eternity is just eating the living, then you're nothing but hunger. Hunger can starve. The water churned violently, waves slamming the hull, but the Leviathan's fury only made her smile through bloody teeth. The fleet prowled for days. Every vessel they met, cargo ships, fishing trawlers, yachts, was devoured. Rachel felt each death course through her veins, but she fought, slipping defiance into the song where she could. Sometimes it was small, a single drowned missing its grip, a victim escaping through a hatch. Sometimes larger, a ship limping away into the fog. Each crack widened the chorus. Each defiance left scars in the harmony. The Leviathan tried to drown her with visions. She saw oceans boiling, continents swallowed, cities dragged beneath the waves. She saw her own body crowned in kelp and bone, leading 1 billion drowned across an endless horizon. But still she whispered, no. Then came the storm. The sky split in half, lightning falling in sheets, waves rising high enough to crush steel. The fleet did not slow. They moved in perfect synchrony, riding the chaos like predators scenting blood. And there it was, a vessel larger than any Rachel had yet seen. A floating palace layered with decks lit like a jewel even in the storm. Thousands of passengers huddled inside, believing the storm itself was their only danger. The Leviathan purred. This one is ours. Its feast will sow your voice into the bedrock of the sea. Rachel's stomach twisted. She felt every beating heart aboard fragile and real. Children, families, lovers, lives with futures, lives she refused to surrender, her lips curled back. Then I'll tear my voice out first. And before the Leviathan could bind her throat, Rachel dug her nails deep into her own neck. Blood spurted hot against the rain. She ripped flesh, severing the cords that tethered her voice to the chorus. Pain blinded her, dropping her to her knees. The fleet shuddered violently, lanterns flickering, drowned, collapsing mid-step. The Leviathan roared, an earthquake beneath the waves. Fool! You cannot cut us out, you are us! Rachel's scream was silent now, but inside her mind it burned brighter than ever. The absence of her voice left space for something else. Raw will. She forced the fleet to hesitate. Not stop, not retreat, but hesitate. Long enough that warning flares burst from the palace ship's deck. Long enough that passengers flooded lifeboats. Long enough that not all were lost. The Leviathan bellowed in rage. Shaking the ocean, Rachel collapsed, throat shredded, vision swimming. She couldn't speak, couldn't sing. But she smiled as the palace ship faded into the storm with survivors still clinging to life. You can bleed, she thought, and I can make you starve. But the Leviathan was patient. It did not kill her. It began to remake her. The drowned dragged her to the heart of the ruins, to the pit that pulsed like a wound. They lowered her into the blackness where roots of bone and sinew wrapped around her torn throat, knitting it not as human flesh but as something deeper, older. When she woke, she could speak again, but the voice was not hers. It was stronger, louder, tied to the Leviathan more tightly than ever, and yet, hidden in the marrow of her rebuilt cords, her defiance still smoldered. The Leviathan had not extinguished her. It had armed her. When the Leviathan reforged her throat, it believed it had won twice, punishment and reinforcement. It grafted those new cords like iron bands, braided them with barnacle and bone so her speech carried farther, knifed through fog and water and the chorus alike. The sound that issued forth first was a roar the sea recognized. Lights along 100 decks flared and the drowned straightened, obedient. They looked to her as to a signal, an order. But the thing the Leviathan failed to reckon with was the shape of stubbornness lodged inside a human soul. Pain and memory had done more than break her body. They hammered her will into something harder than before. Beneath the monstrous resonance, tiny sparks of the woman she had been glowed. They had no voice on their own, so she used what she had been given, twisting that terrible instrument against the engine that had built it. On the next hunt, when a pleasure liner glittered like a city and music pulsed through its decks, she did not merely sing. She struck a counterpoint, a low, aching cadence threaded through the Leviathan's hymn, notes that unsettled the bones instead of strengthening them. The drowned glanced around, uncertain, like soldiers whose orders had suddenly soured. Crewmen who had been advancing stalled with hands in midair. A handful of passengers broke from the tide of terror and ran. For every soul that staggered free, Rachel felt the curse claw harder. The repaired voice demanded payment, a memory, a flash of grief, an echo of the smile she once wore, and she paid. Each time she gave a scrap, another cord inside her tightened. It hurt like nothing she had ever known. But the trade allowed one thing the ship hated: hesitation. Hesitation breeds escape. The first boat that slipped away under the veil of chaos carried a child clutching a stuffed animal. The girl's eyes were wide as moons. She kept repeating over and over, "Thank you," until her lips went numb. The parents who followed later flung themselves into the sea and were hauled free by hands that still moved as if they remembered home. Those brief windows widened until a dozen small vessels rode the mist, paddling like frantic birds toward a horizon that held no land. Yet hope is stubborn and sometimes ridiculous, and hope kept rowing. Wordless, Rachel watched survivors puzzle together a possible plan. Flares, mirrored plates to reflect unnatural light. Metal drums banged to create dissonance. They used anything, cutlery, railings, the sound of their own panic, to form irregular rhythms that the Leviathan could not swallow whole. Time and again her contrived harmonies sabotaged the unified chorus, and time and again the cursed fleet answered with greater force. Whole decks collapsed. Rigging snapped like twine. Still, for every dozen swallowed, a handful slipped free. The Leviathan grew furious. It tossed the ocean into calamity, conjuring walls of spray and tearing storms that made every rescued life a victory bought with teeth. Yet with each rescue, the creature's hold seemed to tremble, as though its immense anatomy had been given a week-old fracture to hide. Rachel learned to weaponize nuance. She molded her new timbre into dissonant keys that produced nausea in the drowned, made them forget how to coordinate. She sang lullabies corrupted with jagged intervals that pried open the locks in ruined cabins where survivors hid. She used tones that evoked simple human things: the creak of a porch swing, the click of a coffee pot, noises that pulled the living from memory and freed them from the song's clutch for the length of a breath. Each improvised rescue hardened her resolve and hollowed a little, more of the Leviathan's arrogance. The enormous beast responded by inventing cruelty. It birthed new hybrids from its hull, creatures formed of rope and lung, of mast and molar, with mouths along their ribs that chewed reality into foam. They swarmed the water, snatching oars and dragging bodies down. The soundscape it unleashed was orchestral in malice. Trumpets of rust, percussion of splintering wood, the choir of 1,000 drowned throats that never truly stopped. Still she persisted. When one of those hybrids loped at a drifting raft, Rachel screamed, not with the song's polished terror, but with a sharp, savage shriek that she laced with memory. The scent of warm bread, the feel of a sibling's hand, the lull of a distant field. The hybrid slowed, lost grip, then recoiled, as if the sensation had blinded a nerve. The raft bobbed away, the occupants coughing and gasping like newborns. Word of these leadings spread among the survivors as if transmitted by frantic, thankful birds. They began to cluster around her when they could, pressing their palms to her arms, offering scraps of life: a photograph, a child's toy, a necklace. Each token was both talisman and sacrifice. A small price so she could rethread the corset of her voice with something human. In exchange, she bent the cursed sound to their needs, learning to shape it into distress calls and confusions that crawled between the Leviathan's ribs. These moments were brief and luminous. They were also dangerous. Every time she gave them, sometimes she felt the chorus snag her harder, like a net tightening. Her eyes began to reflect light, not unlike the drowned. Her veins glowed faintly beneath skin when the moon struck her. Some mornings she would forget the taste of coffee. Other days she could remember nothing but salt and a single laugh. Still, she would not let herself be erased. That stubborn kernel, a face, a joke, a street she had once walked, would flame up like a brand when she needed it most. In the belly of the island, where the ruins breathed and the pit throbbed with abyssal hunger, a council convened of sorts. Not of minds, but of waves. Currents pooled into patterns that spelled messages, and ancient bones carved into the stone relayed a history that made ash of modern terror. The Leviathan had not arisen from nothing. It had been gathered, stitched, fed through civilizations fallen into the sea. Cities, navies, empires, all had been grafted into this Leviathanine polity until it dreamed in ships. Rachel understood then why it was so patient and so greedy. It had the weight of civilizations to unravel and a deliberate plan that spanned centuries. Destroying the heart alone was a victory, yes, but a single wound on something that had been accreting souls for ages could stitch itself back. She had to do something the sea had not expected. She had to make the Leviathan feel a loss it could not replace. The idea came like a shard lodged in bone. If the creature collected vessels to keep itself whole, perhaps something unnameable at its root could hate one thing above all: absence. Remove the template of the chorus. Make its instruments silent. Make it not want. So she experimented. She tuned her voice to intervals that canceled each other out, to patterns that led to dead ends. She sang scales that folded inward so the Leviathan's harmonies found themselves echoing into voids. At first, the method created chaos. Drowned collapsed in spasms of sound, ships lurched uncontrollably, and whole decks experienced a kind of vertigo that left them curled on the floor. But chaos in the right place meant openings. Lifeboats launched. Engines restarted. People who had resigned themselves to succumbing clawed back to life. With each success, the Leviathan retaliated more violently. It clawed up from its abyssal throne, splintering islands and tearing at continental shelves. Storms of teeth and thunder chased the escaping rafts. The world grew meaner, yet Rachel kept at it because the alternative was a patient eternity of swallowing. Then, one night when the horizon seemed a bruise, a brazen gambit altered everything. A line of small boats, handmade and patched from wreckage, formed a ring around a small island. Survivors had gathered there with the odd instinct to make a sound that was wholly theirs. Not singing, not the Leviathan's chorus, but a clatter of life, pots and pans, children stamping, men whistling old working tunes. They chanted nonsense at first, then words of defiance. The effect on the beasts was visible. They recoiled, uncertain, like animals whose spoor had been rubbed out. Rachel lent her voice. She layered their clamor with dissonance and then, carefully, wove through it a lullaby she remembered from childhood, one that had never been sung at sea. The combination acted like salt on a wound. The hydra of tuned voices shivered, then fractured. 100 drowned slipped free of their commanded rhythm, standing dazed on decks as if waking from a forced hallucination. What followed could be described as chaos or as a moment of grace. Those ships, once monstrous and cohesive, flailed. Crews that had been corpses half an hour before crawled toward escape hatches. Survivors rode furiously, a mosaic of lives saved by noise, courage, and the crooked, heroic manipulation of a voice the sea had intended as a weapon. The Leviathan screamed, and in that scream, revealed a vulnerable seam, a raw throb where its instrument drew breath. If one could strike the seam repeatedly with enough irregularity, could one force the creature to convulse and sever its own links? Rachel gathered a ragged fleet of willing boats and guided them around that seam. They moved like a clockwork of defiance, paddling to rhythms she shaped with broken shouts and clapping. Every motion she led was a pressure point, a tap on the Leviathan's flesh. It bucked. Water heaved. The sea tried to swallow the ring. Waves towered, but the boats held on. At the core of that ring, between terror and courage, something tore, not the heart on not yet, but a lattice of channels that fed the Leviathan's chorus. Dark ichor spouted into the air like a geyser, and with it came thousands of voices unmoored from the ship. They were like birds thrown from cages, high, panicked, and free. In the sudden vacuum, the chorus faltered deeper than any previous crack. The fleet disintegrated into confusion, each vessel turning inward and then rolling listless as if drunk. For a breath, the ocean was not a prison. For a breath, life reclaimed the surface like green pushing through concrete. People in lifeboats began to cry for relatives, not the chorus. They laughed and vomited and screamed and simply existed without being consumed. Rachel floated among them exhausted, voice shredded, limbs trembling, and realized the impossible truth. The Leviathan could be wounded in ways it couldn't simply regrow from. Its strength was accumulation and cohesion. Strip the cohesion, and the whole edifice risked collapse. She had not vanquished it. She had not even permanently diminished it. But she had proven a method. Irregularity, human clamor, the stubbornness of memory and small domestic noises could fracture the great chorus and free pockets of the living. As dawn, pale and uncertain, crept into the sky for the first time since she could recall, Rachel let herself weep for the lives that had been lost, and for the echoing ache of the ones she still could not save. The sea calmed like a beast whose paw had been jerked. Survivors clung to each other, hushed in relief while the great ship that was the Leviathan writhed in the distance, a slashed Leviathan bellowing into the fog. She had given the world a moment, nothing more. A patch of light and a night that seemed eternal. The chorus, though broken, would convalesce. The creature would learn and adapt and perhaps one day return in a new form. But for now, people rode. Children slept in laps. A man laughed alone and hoarsely, then began to sing a ridiculous, human song, off-key but loud, and it sounded like victory. Rachel watched them and felt at last that her resistance had a shape beyond desperation. It was a plan, a method, a dangerous litany she could teach. She would be both blade and beacon. She would continue to hurt herself and give pieces of herself if that meant other people might wake. The Leviathan's voice, diminished for the moment to a slow thunder, promised retribution. But beneath that threat lay something else she had not expected. Respect. It had taken her whole life to find a way to be the thing that could alter its song. For now, that precarious influence would have to suffice. She touched her throat and felt the new chords vibrate faintly. They were still part of the loom the sea had woven. Yet even as the distant horizon shimmered with the awful silhouettes of the fleet regathering, Rachel understood the truth that would carry her forward. As long as humans could remember the sound of a kettle boiling, the cadence of a lullaby, the clatter of a pan, the sea could be confused. And in confusion lay escape. So she gathered the small flotilla, set a course toward the nearest shore the survivors could name, and began teaching ragged songs that were all wrong, children's rhymes with missing lines, hymns sung in the wrong keys, jokes told loudly and repeatedly. The noise was crude, human, and stubborn. It unsettled the ocean because it was alive. The Leviathan watched and bided. But for this morning, at least, people rowed toward land and remembered what life sounded like. The sea refused to forgive. Though the survivors rowed and sang crooked melodies, the horizon never softened. Fog coiled tighter, swallowing starlight. The sun rose pale, then vanished as if ashamed to shine on waters the Leviathan claimed. Rachel steered their patchwork, flotilla by instinct, following currents that pulsed in her bones. Her cursed throat throbbed with each beat, reminding her she was still tethered. Every splash of an oar echoed back in harmonies not their own. The Leviathan hadn't retreated. It listened. Nights were the worst. Silence tempted the survivors, exhaustion urging them into sleep. But Rachel forced them to keep the dissonance alive. She made them bang pots, whistle tunelessly, chant half-remembered slogans. Noise kept the chorus fractured. Without it, the drowned would slip through the mist like knives. One evening, a boy, no older than 10, began stomping a rhythm on the hull of a lifeboat. His laughter rang shrill, not pretty, not pure, but defiantly human. That sound broke something in Rachel. She remembered her sister's playful tapping on a kitchen counter, a nonsense beat during chores. For a moment, her chest filled with warmth. Then the water beneath them shifted. Shapes emerged from the fog. Ships Rachel recognized, their masts skeletal, their decks sagging with rot. But they were altered. Barnacles and bones fused with hulls, sails stitched from human skin stretched wide, lanterns burned with cold flame, green and endless. And from the water rose something worse. A tower of limbs woven from drowned bodies, ascended like a mast built of flesh. Faces still screamed within it, hands clawing, mouths locked in eternal chorus. The tower bent forward, reaching. The flotilla panicked. Survivors screamed, oars splashed wildly. Boats collided. Rachel's throat vibrated of its own accord, ready to join the Leviathan's command. She clamped both hands over her neck, forcing the sound back. Pain exploded through her skull. Blood seeped between her fingers. "No," she croaked, voice shredded. "Not yours." She looked at the survivors, terrified, desperate, waiting for a leader. And she understood. The Leviathan's greatest weapon wasn't teeth or storm. It was despair. If she let them break, they would sing the chorus themselves. So she stood on the bow, raised her ruined voice, and released something raw. Not melody. Not harmony, just rage. A sound ugly and jagged, scraped from marrow. It split the air like lightning. The drowned tower recoiled, limbs shuddering. Lanterns flickered. For a heartbeat, the fleet faltered. "Now!" Rachel screamed, pointing toward open sea. The survivors rowed, driven by terror and the glimpse of hope she'd carved. Oars struck water in chaotic rhythm, and she layered her scream atop it, weaving their disarray into a weapon. The Leviathan howled, waves rising to crush them, but each misstep, each wrong note, each desperate laugh chipped at its grip. Hours bled into night. By dawn, half the flotilla remained. The rest capsized, dragged beneath, swallowed. But those who survived clung tighter to their noise, their flawed human defiance. Rachel collapsed on the deck, throat torn raw, vision dimming. Yet even as consciousness slipped, she heard something the Leviathan could never erase. Children laughing, survivors singing off-key, the sound of life refusing silence. And beneath it, faint but real, the Leviathan's rhythm stuttered. It could be broken. It would bleed again. Salt crusted her lips. Wounds burned like open furnaces, but the revelation struck sharp as steel. Harmony was the chain, dissonance the knife. The Leviathan thrived on order, on the seamless swell of voices fused into one. Break that current, shatter the pattern, and it faltered. Rachel staggered across the deck, gripping the rail as lightning forked across the horizon. The fleet loomed again, skeletal hulls glowing from within, an armada of nightmares circling closer. She felt the pressure in her rebuilt throat, the parasite embedded deep, ready to drag her song back into perfect resonance. "No," she hissed, coughing blood. "Not your instrument. Not your choir." Her hand brushed a rusted pipe rolling on deck, clanging sharp against the planks. That sound, ugly, metallic, wrong, jolted something inside her. The drowned flinched. Their movement slowed, out of sync for a breath. An idea bloomed like fire. The survivors gathered, ragged and gaunt, clinging to oars and broken planks. Rachel's eyes blazed as she raised the pipe high. "We fight with what we are," she rasped, voice shredded but defiant. "Noise, chaos, flaws, they can't stand it. They choke on it." Confusion rippled across the flotilla. Then realization dawned. Someone banged a pot. Another slammed an oar against the hull. A child whistled off pitch until it cracked into laughter. The sea boiled. The Leviathan shrieked. Every lantern across the fleet flaring at once. Its body surged upward from the depths, monstrous. Infinite, a mountain of eyes, teeth, and tendrils stitched from centuries of swallowed souls. "Stop this." Its command rattled ribs, churned blood, nearly shattered will. "Your defiance feeds us. You cannot win." Rachel gripped the rail, throat bleeding anew, and screamed not words but raw distortion. Half growl, half sob, a sound no choir could tame. The survivors followed. The flotilla erupted in discord. Drums of wood and iron, screams jagged as glass, laughter pitched into hysteria. The sea itself recoiled. The Leviathan thrashed, tentacles lashing, ships colliding in ruin. Drowned collapsed like puppets with strings cut, faces contorting in agony as the chorus fractured. The towering body of the monster split in places, black ichor spilling, boiling the waves. Rachel pressed harder, pushing through agony until her cursed throat tore wider. Flesh ripped, bone cracked, but what poured out was not music. It was truth. Ugly, broken, utterly human. The Leviathan convulsed. "Stop, stop," it screamed, turned to gurgling. Lanterns shattered across the fleet. Hulls split open, spilling corpses into the water, dissolving into ash. One final surge of sound erupted from Rachel and the survivors. A crescendo of chaos so violent the horizon itself trembled. And then, silence. The sea stilled. The Leviathan's form collapsed into the abyss, black water swallowing its carcass. The fleet disintegrated, ships rotting to splinters within moments. For the first time in centuries, the ocean was just ocean. Rachel fell to her knees, throat destroyed, unable to speak ever again. But as the survivors clung to one another, voices hoarse from screaming, she knew the curse was broken. The Leviathan was gone. Not slain by perfection, but by imperfection. Not by unity, but by defiance. By the refusal to sing the same note. By being human. And though Rachel would never utter another word, the silence she left behind would echo louder than any chorus. The sea was still. Too still. The waves that had once carried a monster now rocked the flotilla with gentle indifference, as though the ocean had been innocent all along. The survivors blinked into the silence, their hands still trembling, their throats raw from the cacophony that had saved them. Rachel lay collapsed on the deck, chest heaving, blood pooling beneath her cheek. Her throat was ruined, jagged scars where her voice had been. Every attempt at breath felt like swallowing knives. Yet her eyes remained open, wide and fierce, staring into the sky as if daring the stars to vanish again. Children clung to their mothers. Strangers embraced like kin. Some wept loudly, others sat stunned, tears cutting silent tracks down their faces. The sound was not harmony, it was broken, uneven, human. And it was beautiful. For a fleeting moment they allowed themselves to believe it was over. Rachel tried to rise. Her body resisted, but she clawed at the rail until she was upright, swaying on bloodied legs. Every face turned toward her. The woman who had screamed against a god. The woman who had refused silence. She opened her mouth. Nothing came. Not even a whisper. Tears burned her eyes. She had saved them, but at the cost of her voice, her sister's songs, her laughter, her very self. She pressed trembling fingers against her ruined throat, mourning the loss that could never heal. A boy stepped forward, the same child who had stomped rhythm into the lifeboat. His small hands gripped a dented pot, and with shy defiance he banged it once against the wood. The hollow clang rang out over the water. Others followed. An oar tapped. A whistle cracked off key. A sob turned into a jagged laugh. The air filled again with chaos. Not fear this time, but stubborn joy. Rachel fell to her knees, silent sobs racking her body. They had learned her lesson. They would never sing in unison again. They would never give the sea a perfect chorus. The Leviathan was gone, but its shadow would never leave them. The survivors rode toward a horizon no longer veiled. Sunlight finally broke through the clouds, spilling gold across the water. Yet behind them, deep in the abyss, the ocean held its secrets. Some swore they still felt a pulse beneath the waves, a rhythm too faint to hear, too steady to ignore. Rachel turned once, gazing into the endless dark. Her lips moved without sound, not a prayer, not a curse, just one promise: if you ever rise again, we will not sing your song. And with that vow etched silently into the morning air, the flotilla drifted onward, scarred but unbroken. The ocean was quiet. But silence would never mean safety again.